Who are some of the wide receiver prospects the Carolina Panthers should be focused on this weekend at the Combine? I'll tell you right here on Locked On Panthers.
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, as always, Julian Council, talking Carolina Panthers with you every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Your team every day. That's our motto here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Subscribe or follow the show for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, on Twitter at Julian Council, where on Fridays throughout the offseason right here on the show, I'll be answering your weekly Friday mailbag questions either at me or DM me to participate in this week's edition of the weekly Friday mailbag right here on Locked On Panthers. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started today. All right, so if you're watching on YouTube, you can see different background for your boy today, as I am in Las Vegas right now. I'm here in Vegas for the Truck Series race. My day job is with the Motor Racing Network and NASCAR. We have a broadcast to do on Friday evening at Las Vegas Motor Speedway, and they sent your boy out here to Vegas for the first time ever. Never been to Vegas. Saw the Grand Canyon when flying over here on Thursday. That was cool, and my apologies getting this out a little bit later than I want to, and also any sort of connectivity issues. I'm in a hotel using hotel Wi-Fi, so I'm doing the best that I can, but hopefully, as I always record behind me, the audio feed on the podcast stream should always be quality. So if the video stream is a little bit choppy, because I did see a little bit of the three, I don't even know what you even call it, the three dots kind of not necessarily being completely high, just bear with me. But I'm here. I'm ready to talk Panthers, and let's talk a little bit about some Combine stuff. There was a couple of news items that came out on Wednesday, and I wanted to wait a little bit before doing this Thursday show. I know it's a lot later. I'm recording at 4:31 West Coast time, so 7:30 on the East Coast. So getting this out a lot later than I typically do on a Thursday. I was trying to see if there was going to be some Brian Burns news or some other news that was going to drop on Wednesday. And then once I woke up Thursday morning, I was like, okay, let's just fly to Vegas and get there. Usually when you out of town, Julian, big news happens, and now you guys know I'm out of town. Big news likely going to happen tomorrow when at the racetrack. And then, of course, I have a red eye back Friday evening to get back at 6 a.m. at Charlotte Douglas Airport. So we'll see how that all goes. But let's get into a couple of the prospects, wide receiver-wise, I think the Panthers really should be focused on at the Combine. And the Panthers, like every NFL team this week in Indianapolis, have been conducting interviews with these players. What the draft is a big job interview for all these athletes coming from college, whatever other avenue, to try and get drafted into the NFL and to go have success. And the Carolina Panthers have been interviewing these prospects all week long, and I imagine they've been focused on the wide receiver class. And Dan Morgan, who's now the general manager here, the president of football operations, talked about how quality of a class this is. And typically, I feel like that's going to be the case moving forward in the NFL, just knowing how important it is to have a quality pass game at every level if you want to have success. Still, it's always going to be a line of scrimmage game, but you have to have quality receivers. You have to have quality quarterbacks. And the Carolina Panthers believe they have a quality quarterback. They just did not get to see that quality last year because the offensive line wasn't great. As we know, they had one of the worst receiving cores in the NFL. Everyone outside of Adam Thielen was a major disappointment in 2023 for the Carolina Panthers. So as things currently stand, having not gone through free agency, the Carolina Panthers' top priority at 33rd overall is wide receiver, finding a playmaker who can help out Bryce Young and get him to start playing like the number one overall pick that the Carolina Panthers selected him to be last April in the draft. So a couple of the receivers I'm looking at 33. I've looked at a couple mock drafts, and I've seen these names right there at the end of the first round, early second round, and they've been even chosen by the Panthers by some of these mock draft experts out there. These are a couple guys I think the Panthers really hopefully spoke to this week, but really should pay attention to this weekend as more of the NFL combine drills actually go on. On Thursday right now, the only thing I saw is that wide receivers had have gone out and weighed in. I'm imagining Friday, Saturday, that's when they're going to start doing the 40-yard dash, 3-cone drill, and all that kind of stuff that they do. But these are a couple guys I'm really looking at as potential prospects for the Carolina Panthers at 33rd overall, barring that's what they want to do is go for a receiver after going through free agency. The first guy I'm looking at is Troy Franklin. And a lot of these numbers are going to be coming from NFL.com and NFL Next Gen Stats. His prospect grade on NFL.com is a 6.40, which equals that he will become a good starter within 2 years. The Panthers would like for him to be a good starter immediately, but as Dan Morgan pointed out with Jonathan Mingo, he has all of the traits to be a high-level starter. It's just difficult to come into the NFL and to dominate right away. We did see some rookies have outstanding seasons that were drafted ahead of Mingo, that were also drafted behind Mingo. I am not necessarily impressed by him, but we have to be patient. And I can't sit here and say be patient with Bryce Young and not also be patient with Jonathan Mingo. So let me step back and be more patient. But still, the Panthers are looking for some impact players to come in right away. You would think that free agency, you want to find an impact wide receiver. Hopefully Mingo takes a step up in this year, especially with the coaching staff of a lot of guys that have worked with wide receivers in the past here on Dave Canales' offensive staff, and just another year of experience that should help him. But Troy Franklin, NFL.com, his prospect grade is a 6.40, saying he'll become a good starter within 2 years, which is positive. His production score is 88, which is fourth best of the combine wide receivers. His athleticism score is a 74, which is 16th best. And then his total score is an 82, fourth. So according to Next Gen Stats, Troy Franklin is one of the top 4 receivers up in Indianapolis at the combine right now. He's right up there with Marvin Harrison Jr., with Malik Neighbors, with Rome Odunze. He's right behind those guys as a 4th receiver, and possibly not going to be available for the Carolina Panthers. I have seen him as number 24 prospect on Pro Football Focus's big board. I've seen him go in the first round. I've seen him go in the second round. We'll see where that all goes after this. An NFL scouting director had this to say about Troy Franklin, saying he's not an explosive receiver like he's not as explosive as Jalen Hyatt was coming out, but I look at him in a similar way with what he can do for your offense, what you want ask him to do. He's a better route runner than Hyatt. And this is one of the things that I worry about when it comes to like those deep ball speed guys. We've seen in the past of a guy like a John Ross who came out of Washington, I think was drafted by Cincinnati in the top 10. He never really turned out to be that big time of a player. I think that even Henry Ruggs, before things went bad for him, obviously here in Las Vegas, he was somebody who he's got the speed, but is he a polished route runner? He's going to be a big kind of play guy for you. I think Troy Franklin absolutely can be that guy. What Bo Nix at Oregon this past year really leaned on him. I would love to see Troy Franklin here in Carolina. The second guy I'm looking at is Adonai Mitchell, or also known as A.D. Mitchell. Started off at Georgia, then went to Texas this past year, helped them get to the college football playoff. Was outstanding in a number of games this past season. And of the 2 Texas receivers, I like him way more than Xavier Worthy. Maybe I'll be wrong about this at the next level once they both get an opportunity. I look at A.D. Mitchell as a better player. He's made the big plays in the big moments. When you look at the game against Oklahoma, yes, they might have lost. He made some big plays against Alabama on the road, in the Sugar Bowl against Washington late in that game, the touchdown, playing in the playoff with Georgia, scored a touchdown in each of those playoff games. I love A.D. Mitchell. Now, the grades don't love him as much as I do, having watched in the last couple of years at Texas and at Georgia. His prospect grade is a 6.37, which equals that he will eventually be a plus starter. His production score is a 72, which is 17th out of the wide receivers at the combine this week. His athleticism score is a 30th. His total score is a 75, which is 21st. The grades don't love A.D. Mitchell as much as I do. And there seems to be some mixed reviews from a lot of the scouts. And there's another guy we'll talk about later where the reviews are really mixed. A.D. Mitchell, this is from an AFC scouting director. If he can play every game like he played the Alabama game, he'll be one of the best receivers in the league. They have first-round corners, and he gave them problems. And yes, they do, with Kool-Aid McKinstry and Terrion Arnold. Those were great. Honestly, Alabama probably the best secondary in college football this past season, and you saw what Texas did to them in the second week of the season on the road in Tuscaloosa, winning that game by 10 points. Texas looked outstanding too in that conference championship game against Oklahoma State. I was like, man, these guys look national championship ready. Didn't look that great offensively in the Sugar Bowl against Washington. Not quite sure how that worked out. Now, Washington does have some quality corners and defensive players who can get an opportunity to be drafted in about a month or so. Well, in a month, because we're about to enter into March. So it'll be interesting to see how that works out with them. But I think A.D. Mitchell is someone worth taking there at 33. There's questions about just how fluid of a route runner he is. I have this kind of principle at times, like it really for NBA players, where you want to get the athlete, especially when so much younger. You're looking at like 18, 19-year-old prospects. Take the athlete, develop the player. Now, football is a little bit different because they're older and you really want to get some instant gratification, but it does take some time. But if you can take the athlete and you know he has the skills and he's shown you the production in the past, and that's the thing, like Mingo, the athleticism is there, but the production has not been there. With A.D. Mitchell, the production has been there. He has the athleticism. Why not just bring that athlete in and just hone in those skills and get that effort? Because that's the thing. Effort seems to be the one question about him. But when the stage is bright, the dude shows up, and I think he could be a baller for the Carolina Panthers. We'll see, though, whether that's the road they want to go down once they get to that point in time. There's two other guys I want to talk about here on the show, but we'll get to them here in just a moment on Locked on Panthers. This next segment is brought to us by our sponsor, BetterHelp. What's the first thing you do if you had an extra hour in your day? A lot of us spend our lives wishing we had more time. The question is, time for what? If time was limited, how would you use it? The best way to squeeze that special thing into your schedule is to know what's important to you and make it a priority. Therapy can help you find what matters to you so you can do more of it. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire and get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Learn to make time for what makes you happy with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOn today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOn. Right back here on Locked on Panthers. And again, from my hotel here in Vegas, the Wi-Fi for the YouTube audience may be spotty. Go back and listen to the podcast feed. That should be much better. If this is a spot, I think it may be. Try my best here. Typically, get to stay in Marriott's, and you can always advance your Wi-Fi speed there. Had to do that last year when the Panthers decided to trade up for the number one pick and give away DJ Moore. I had to go back to my hotel after that event and do that podcast. It was like probably like 1 o'clock on the East Coast by the time I went live on YouTube. And I know a lot of y'all are all across the world. We have this new podcast platform as far as we upload the shows, and I can start seeing like where people are listening to from all over the world. Like I know people listen here in the States, so I can see people listening in Australia. Shout out to whoever that is, to Nairobi and Kenya. It's pretty cool to see that. So appreciate all the fans out there worldwide. Also saw Germany, hoping to get down there to Munich later on this year. If it's traditionally the same time in November it's been the last couple of years, should be able to make that work out. Yeah, flights from Charlotte list are 6:03 round trip. And the NFL won't tell us when that's going to be until mid-May. So it's driving me insane. And I know as soon as the announcement's made, those prices are going to go way up. So hopefully that won't be the case. But let's get back into the wide receiver prospects here on the show today that the Panthers should be looking at the Combine this weekend. Two more I want to talk about. McConkey out of Georgia. Twitchy, small, like this is not twitchy. Probably not the best. Like small is definitely not the most appealing trait, I guess, to throw out there about a wide receiver. But he's a smaller guy. But he's got some twitch to him. Great route runner. Just your classic New England Patriots slot receiver back in the heyday with Tom Brady when they had Wes Welker, like Julian Edelman. Like that's the guy that I think Ladd McConkey could be. And Adam Thielen, he has one more year where he truly will be a Carolina Panther. We'll see what his production is at age 34. And they're out contract next off season, what the Panthers decide to do. If he plays like he did this past year, then yeah, he's coming back over your age 35 season in the NFL. But if he had a dip, and the Panthers able to get better production out of Mingo, go find a number one wide receiver, and then maybe even draft a guy in the second round of 33rd, maybe a Ladd McConkey, you have an Adam Thielen replacement. That's what McConkey could be down the road. I'll be interested to see if the Panthers were to take him, how he would fit in to this scheme with also Thielen being a slot guy. Thielen could play outside, doesn't have the kind of to do that. So if he ever really had that much speed, but still, I don't know how that would work out. But Dave Canales, supposedly a smart guy, obviously, when it comes to calling plays and with his offense, we'll see how that all develops. And he's going to be somebody who's going to try and cater. He's going to cater the offense to the skill players that he has and not try to fit them into the offensive scheme that he wants to run. Looking at Ladd McConkey's grades, his prospect grade, just like A.D. Mitchell is a .37, which means he will eventually be a plus starter, which is great news for the Carolina Panthers if that becomes true. His production score is a 69, which is 24th out of the receivers at the combine. His athleticism score is 78, which is 13th. His total score is a 77, which is 11th. So right there around top 10 receivers at the combine. And that does not necessarily mean that, like, I don't even know what to say about that. I guess not bad. He's not an elite guy. He's probably the top third, which is solid, especially if you're considering second round, and not going to be 10 receivers who go before Ladd McConkey in this draft. I don't think that's going to happen. And that's just one part of the equation. Looking at one of the scouting reports from the NFL scouting director said really smart. You can tell he watches a ton of tape with how good he is at picking up and how to attack guys he's facing. And Georgia's a program we've seen defensively. They put out some outstanding players. Offensively, they haven't quite been there just yet. I think this might be the time that's going to change a little bit with Brock Bowers in this draft. He should be the top tight end taken. Ladd McConkey, who knows? Maybe there's a way he sneaks in the first round, but if not, he could be right there at 33rd to be taken by the Panthers. I think he's someone absolutely looking at as he's been wildly productive. And I'm talking about a guy like A.D. Mitchell, who I love. A.D. Mitchell, he's struggled with some injuries at Georgia, but Ladd McConkey was a better player at Georgia than A.D. Mitchell was when he was there. And for a team that won back-to-back national championships before losing in the SEC championship to Alabama this past year, he's been their top receiver. So that has to mean something to somebody out there, that this guy in the SEC, which is considered the best conference in college football, to have that kind of production and to be able to play that well on those stages. I'm interested in Ladd McConkey. He's not my top guy, but if he comes out, Carolina Panthers select Ladd McConkey, wide receiver, Georgia, I'm going to be down with it. I'm cool with Ladd McConkey. Now, this guy, though, I'm about to talk about, I don't even know how on earth this is going to be a fourth-round pick. Or, sorry, it's not going to be a first-round pick. Jesus, a first-round pick. Keon Coleman out of Florida State. Started off his career at Michigan State. Left there, went to FSU. His first game as a Seminole, 3 touchdowns against LSU. The Clemson game, where quite honestly, and I'm sure there's some Clemson fans out there who listen to this podcast, your boys should have won that game. The Clemson Tigers were a better team that day, but then the fumble happened, and in the beginning of overtime, Keon Coleman makes an outstanding catch. Had a touchdown earlier in that game, 2 touchdowns, big stage in Death Valley at noon to win that game. He was outstanding. And it's one of the disappointing things about how it worked out the college football playoff that FSU didn't get an opportunity, because Jared Verse is a first-round pick. You got Keon Coleman, who'd be a first-round pick. Like, just studs. The last Pro Football Focus mock draft I saw had him going 32nd in the draft to Kansas City. And if he's going to be right there at the end of the first round, beginning of the second round, the Panthers got to consider Keon Coleman. His prospect grade is a 6.29, which says it will eventually be an average starter. That's not the most encouraging grade based off of the other guys we talked about. His production score is a 72, which is 18th out of the wide receivers at the combine this week. Athleticism score is a 70, which is 25th. And then his total score is 75th, which is 16th. I've read a lot about Keon Coleman. There just seems to be really differing opinions out there, and there's going to be differing opinions. I'm sure for the guys that love Marvin Harrison Jr. the most, there's someone out there who's probably wild, who's out there thinking that, oh yeah, he's not that great. I don't hype. I don't want to be that guy. I think Keon Coleman is a stud, and I just don't see how we went from, and this is my frustration with like the whole draft process as someone who loves college football, how we can go from, okay, this dude back in like October is one of the top 3 receiver prospects to now we're not quite sure if he's even a first round pick. All right, looking at last season, Roma Dunze was the best wide receiver in college football. I understand Marvin Harrison Jr. won the Blitnikoff for the best wide receiver in college football. Roma Dunze was the best wide receiver in college football. Rome absolutely has put himself into being a first round pick. Year prior, Roma Dunze was also one of the best wide receivers in college football. So there's consistency there. Marvin Harrison Jr., we understand how good he is, the pedigree, but also even if his name wasn't Marvin Harrison Jr., he's a freaking stud. Malik Neighbors did it the year prior, did it again last year, breaking LSU records. Who's come out of LSU recently? Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, only the best 2 receivers in the National Football League. So being behind those guys, not that crazy. Being behind Troy Franklin, who I like, to me, after watching Keon Coleman this year, I'm kind of like, I'm scratching my head. I'm a little puzzled there. Keon Coleman is a first-round caliber player. There might be some traits about him that people don't feel like are first-round caliber, But looking at the production, and that's what I care about. And yes, the traits they have to matter too. The dude is a football player, and watching him play football, it was clear to me that there were not very many. There's probably three. The guys I mentioned, Neighbors, Harrison Jr., and Adunze, three college receivers better than him last year. I just don't see how he's even questioned as a first-round pick. Now, looking at his strengths, took a couple of them, took a couple of his weaknesses. His strengths say prototypical size and high ball skills, attacks underneath throws with extended sticky hands. His weaknesses, press coverage can blanket his release and catch a ride, and there's some concerns about whether he can get separation. And we know after watching this past season, looking at NFL Next Gen stats and just how poor Carolina Panthers receivers were at gaining separation, that is a concern. Also below average acceleration, getting breaks and cuts, which is interesting because he was FSU's punt returner and he returned a ton of yardage this past season there in that special teams role. I love Keon Coleman. Of the guys that we talked about today, Franklin, Mitchell, McConkey, Coleman's the guy I would want. If he's there at 33 and if the Panthers are looking for a receiver at 33, that's the dude I'd want. It'd be him, probably Troy Franklin after that, but maybe even A.D. Mitchell. And then, like, I don't even want to put McConkey last. It's hard to even just want to rank these guys. But the one guy I know I like more than the other three is Keon Coleman. So I don't care about the prospect grades. I watched him play this year, and that is a first-round pick wide receiver to me. May not be in reality, but to me, I see with Keon Coleman. So we'll see how things play out. But the Carolina Panthers have been active all week, I'm sure, behind the scenes trying to figure out what to do with Brian Burns and his contract. And we'll go through the weekend, maybe when I'm at the track, and find out what the deal is there, as they have until next Tuesday at 4 p.m. to either extend him or give him the franchise tag before the start of free agency. We'll see what happens to Frankie Louvu, Derek Brown, and also, maybe there are any kind of trades Panthers been cooking up this week in Indianapolis. There was some newsy items surrounding the team on Wednesday. A new practice facility could be on the horizon. And David Tepper, buddy, low marks yet again, according to the NFLPA survey. We'll talk about here in just a moment on Locked on Panthers. The wait is almost over. North Carolina, FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, is coming to our state on March 11th. We'll finally be able to bet on all our favorite teams and all our favorite sports. With FanDuel, there's tons of ways for you to get in on the action. You can bet on everything from the money line to over-unders to which team will win this year's Tobacco Road rivalry, all on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, with live betting, you can even pick which player will put up the next bucket and the one after that. See for yourself why FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon so you can be the first to know when FanDuel goes live in North Carolina. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel. One more segment live from my Las Vegas hotel. I'll be back in the hotel again for the weekly Friday mailbag. Getting this Thursday show out to you later than usual. Now, if you're on the West Coast, getting it out to you earlier than usual. No, but that's still later than usual. In prime time for you all out here on the West Coast, like your boy right now. So gonna get the mailbag out to you whenever I wake up. I'll do it, and then hopefully be out probably before 3 o'clock Eastern time on Friday afternoon. So stay tuned there. Still have time if you're watching this show or listening to this show late on Thursday to send me in some questions. Got some good questions so far. I actually haven't looked at the questions. I've seen the questions come in, haven't read them, but I'm sure they're gonna be good questions. So we'll get to that as I get choked up on tomorrow's show. But closing out the show today, couple of things that I saw on Wednesday, just want to discuss a little bit. And this is part of the thing about yesterday. I was like, okay, do I do a show? I see the PA survey, but like, how much does that really mean? And then the other stuff, like it's newsy items, but like, how much can I really offer? But I'm going to offer as much as I can. Not a ringing endorsement for your boy. I don't know why I'm doing that. All right, David Tepper. The NFLPA survey, we heard about that back before the head coaching cycle came out. The Panthers had 2 coordinators that were ranked second as far as at their respective coordinator positions. Thomas Brown was the number 2 OC. Of course, his offense was terrible, but the players loved him. He's no longer here in Carolina. Chris Tabor was the number 2 special teams coordinator. He actually was a good special teams coordinator. He's no longer here in Carolina. The one coordinator who was not ranked top 5 is Jerry Rivera. He's still here in Carolina. So funny how those things kind of work, but that was more about just how the players feel about the coaches than how they feel about like actual results on the field. How they feel about the owner is they gave him a D, and that is not necessarily tied to the results on the field, which have all 100% been on David Tepper and his just over-involvement with this football team, and the players are to blame as well, of course. With David Tepper, it starts at the top. Everything wrong in Carolina goes right back to you, sir. Looking at it, the club owner David Tepper receives a score of 6.6 out of 10 from Panthers players when considering his willingness to invest in facilities, which is 28th overall as far as his ranking as a owner in the NFL. The major factor in this score was David Tepper's decision to change their home stadium from grass to turf, while 100% of the players said they prefer to play on grass. And we've heard this plenty of times. You had the Christmas Eve game back in 22 against Detroit, and it was just a frozen service, and there was a lot of concern there. They put a heated blanket on it this past season when they were expecting a cold weather game to make sure that was not going to be a concrete surface once again. Shaq Thompson's come out and talked about how much he said, oh, in the NFLPA, the players, they hate the turf. They want grass, and the only time you ever see grass go on to Bank of America Stadium is when an international soccer team comes, and that's just a terrible fuck your players, both Charlotte FC and for the Panthers, that the only time you're willing to accommodate any athlete when it comes to the surface is when it's like Chelsea coming to your club because they're giving you money. Not the guys that, you know, you're making a ton of money off of because you own the league, but the guys who are coming from overseas to give you money to go play at that stadium. That's the only time that you care about them. So he's certainly deserving of a D, and he's not the only owner out there that's just not willing to do a grass field. I know up in New York, the Mara family and the Jets family as well, but the Maras, MetLife notorious for how bad their turf. San Francisco had a bunch of dudes just blow out their knees a couple of years ago up there. They changed whatever kind of turf that they use. And the Panthers just put down, or really David Tepper Sports Entertainment put down new turf ahead of the Charlotte FC opener, which is good. Like, they're changing it out. And I understand why he does it, because they have a lot of events now. You have 17 home games in MLS. You have 8 or 9 home games as far as the NFL season goes. That's counting preseason as well. What that doesn't count preseason because it's 17, 20. So it's 10. You got 10 home games. It looks like 9 this year. They're going to be overseas in Munich. Be at 10 of those days. It's already in the college football games they have, the ACC championship. Got the Dukes Mayo kickoff at the beginning of the season. And then concerts. Got Morgan Wallen here this summer coming up. They've had other concerts. I get why he did it. It was in Pittsburgh where he saw what the condition of the field was. It's not like the Bank of America Stadium grass field was great in the past. It just, to me, one of the richest owners in the NFL. You have the money to do it. You just don't want to do it. And this goes back to him being cheap and how things played out in Rock Hill. I'm not kind of sitting here and telling him how to spend his money. We all know he can afford to do it. We all know he could have afforded to build the facility out in Rock Hill by himself. He did not need the state of South Carolina's money, but there's a reason why he's rich and how he got to stay rich, by spending other people's money and not his own. Some other grades: treatment of families was a B. That's 7th overall. Food and cafeteria is a B. Apparently, that was something the Panthers hated the year prior, but they got a new lead chef. So that's a good thing that Tepper actually listened there. I don't know if he's going to listen on the surface. I highly doubt that would be the case. So that was 13th. Nutritionist/dietitian was a B+. That was 6th. Locker room C+, which is 18th. Training room C+, which is 18th. I'm imagining that those are going to be some areas that get upgraded for sure. Training staff A-, which is 3rd. Weight room B, which is 15th. Strength coaches A, which is 4th. Team travel B-, 11th. Head coach was an A-, 16th. Like the guys like Frank was willing to listen to the locker room. He's a former player. Just the results on the field were not great. I honestly believe that those facilities are going to get better. Tepper wanted another facility. He just didn't want to spend the money, and then the whole politics of South Carolina and all of that played out there. He wanted to be able to stay the art facility. He wants to have one of the top facilities in the NFL. Just right now, like what they had before the bubble, that did not work out. And speaking of his willingness to invest in facilities and the bubble, on Tuesday, Carolina Panthers LLC filed additional documents for a rezoning request with the city of Charlotte. That was reported by WSOC, our ABC station. The new filings propose the use of practice/training facilities and fieldhouse facilities, indoor seating for sports and events/performances, viewing on a periodic basis, and up to 5,000 seats for such uses outdoors on periodic basis. The team originally filed a rezoning request to make adjustments to their practice facility in November. Those initial filings led to the demolition of the team's practice bubble, the HM Health Dome, as it was called, in further construction on the site of the team's longstanding practice facility outside of a Bank of America Stadium. And we know the Panthers will not be in Spartanburg for the first time ever. Well, I guess second time ever, because they weren't there during the pandemic right there in Charlotte. So the second time ever, but they're now no longer going to be at Wofford for training camp. Looks like they want to use a C-Street facility to have training camp and to also expand that. The latest request by the Panthers gives the team flexibility in how it reshapes the practice facility to accommodate the new training camp setting. The proposed use of mobile and retail food vendors would, in theory, allow the Panthers to host pop-up events within a training camp setting, similar to other teams around the NFL. An allowance of 5,000 seats will provide the Panthers a way to accommodate spectators for training camp and various events. So it won't be as permanent as the structure was going to be out in Rock Hill, where Tepper wanted to have concert, wanted to have high school football there. And the high school football thing, I'm not even going to sit here and like criticize this man at all. They had Providence Day play a game last year at Bank of America Stadium. Growing up here in Charlotte, I always wish that like the state championship was there, because I would see in Texas how they played it at Cowboys Stadium. I was like, man, how awesome would that be in our state if that could happen? Like playing at State, playing at Carolina, playing at Wake, playing at Duke. I don't think they play at Duke. All that's great. But man, wouldn't it be cool if they could play at the NFL stadium like some of the other states do? And yeah, it's not ever going to be a sellout. I know that, but still would be really cool. Love what Tech's done with that. Also utilizing Memorial Stadium, and I live right down there in Elizabeth, so seeing that have high school games is really cool as well. The Panthers helping put that on, so kudos to him. Just not going to have a permanent structure like they were going to have in Rock Hill. Quote from the Panthers spokesperson saying the rezoning filing is a necessary step as we work through the strategic vision for our facility. It will enable us to pursue enhancements and modifications to the practice fields with the goal of constructing a field house for football operations and community opportunities like training camp. So we'll see what it looks like. I think it will be probably as well run as possible. And I do eventually, we'll see how things play out with the stadium and the whole Charlotte Pipe and Foundry location, whether it's going to be a new stadium here in Charlotte, whether it's going to be a dome. And Tepper says he want to do that after the pandemic. Don't really see how that really matters all that much. But still, we'll see how that plays out. But eventually, after seeing how things played out in York County, he's going to want to really twist the arm of the sheep that we have in city council and leadership in Charlotte and squeeze my money as a taxpayer so that he can build a fancy facility that he could afford on his own. So look forward to that day coming, but cool little updates there as far as a new facility or however they're going to be making that complex as they move forward into the offseason and prepare for training camp. That's going to wrap up this edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, hosted by yours truly, Julian Council. Again, y'all, subscribe or follow the show free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, on Twitter at Julian Council, where I'll be back tomorrow on Friday answering your weekly Friday mailbag questions, either at me or DM me to get those questions into me now. But in the meantime, be safe, be happy, be whole as always, and forever keep pounding. And I'll talk to y'all on Friday.